You've never been alone in your own mind. That thought you had 3 seconds ago, the one that made you doubt yourself, that whispered you're not good enough, that sudden urge to sabotage the very thing you've been building, it didn't come from you. Right now, as you listen to this, there's a statistical probability that 4 out of every 7 internal dialogues running through your consciousness aren't originating from your authentic self. They're coming from somewhere else. Something else. In 1945, an Egyptian farmer named Muhammad al-Saman was digging for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi when his shovel struck a sealed earthenware jar. Inside, wrapped in leather, were 13 ancient codices, books that had been hidden in the desert for 1600 years. Among them were the Gnostic scriptures, and they described something that made early Christian authorities so uncomfortable they tried to erase it from history entirely. They called them Archons. Non-physical entities that could speak through human beings, mimicking our voice so perfectly we'd never know the difference. We filed it under mythology, ancient paranoia, primitive superstition. But in 2019, Dr. Michael Persinger's laboratory at Laurentian University was documenting something that shouldn't exist. Using quantitative electroencephalography, his team measured electromagnetic signatures in the brain's left temporal lobe during episodes of intrusive thought. The patterns didn't match the subject's baseline neural activity. The frequency, the rhythm, the electromagnetic signature, it was different. The thoughts were there, inside the subject's minds, narrated in their own internal voice. But the brain scans revealed they weren't being generated by the usual neural pathways. The thoughts were coming from somewhere else. You think you're in control of your mind. You think that stream of consciousness narrating your life, the voice you've trusted since childhood, is entirely yours. But what if it isn't? What if the reason you can't break certain patterns, can't silence certain fears, can't stop that loop of self-sabotage, isn't because you're weak or broken or fundamentally flawed, but because something else has learned to speak in your voice? What if you've been carrying a passenger and you never knew? There are 7 unmistakable signs. Physical signs. Psychological signs. Signs your body is trying to show you every single day. And if you're experiencing even 3 of them right now, you need to understand what's happening to you. Not tomorrow, not when you're ready. Right now, because the longer they speak through you, the more they sound like you, until you can't tell the difference anymore. Until you forget you were ever anything else. The Gnostic texts weren't gentle. They didn't sugarcoat what they discovered. They described Archons as counterfeit spirits, entities existing in a realm adjacent to ours, surviving by feeding on human emotional energy the way you and I consume food. But here's the part that makes your skin crawl. They don't possess you the way Hollywood dramatizes it. No spinning heads, no demonic voices. They don't need theatrics. They simply overlay. Think of it like placing a transparent film over your consciousness, a filter that translates your thoughts through their frequency before you hear them in your mind. You're still you. You're still making decisions, having opinions, living your life. But there's an undertone, a bias, a gravitational pull toward fear, shame, doubt, and despair that you can't quite explain. The early Christian church knew about this. In 325 AD, at the Council of Nicaea, Emperor Constantine gathered 318 bishops to standardize Christian doctrine. What most people don't know is that they systematically removed 45 books from the biblical canon, texts that described in precise, practical detail how to detect and remove these spiritual attachments. The Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, the Apocryphon of John. All of them referenced the Archons. All of them included instructions for spiritual sovereignty. Why would they remove this knowledge? Because if people knew they could identify and remove these influences themselves, without a priest, without an institution, without paying indulgences or begging for intercession, the entire structure of religious control would collapse. An empowered human being who knows how to clean their own consciousness is a human being you can't manipulate, and manipulation requires ignorance. Fast forward to 1947. The CIA launched Project Stargate, a $20 million program investigating psychic phenomena and remote viewing. Declassified documents released in 2017 contain something they never intended the public to see: references to non-corporeal intelligence capable of thought insertion. Military remote viewers, trained to project their consciousness across distances, reported encounters with entities that didn't have bodies, but absolutely had intent. Beings that could interface with human thought patterns and make operatives believe the entity's thoughts were their own. One remote viewer, Angela Ford, spent 6 years in the program before leaving and speaking publicly about her experiences. She described the sensation as wearing someone else's prescription glasses without realizing they aren't yours. Everything looks almost right, but there's a distortion you can't name, and after a while, you forget what clear vision even feels like. This isn't fringe material anymore. This is documented, declassified, military intelligence. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, written in the 8th century, calls them hungry ghosts, beings trapped in a state of perpetual craving, unable to satisfy their own needs, feeding on the emotional states of the living. The Quran, in Surah 114, refers to them as the whisperers, entities that withdraw when detected but return the moment your guard drops, inserting doubts and fears into your heart. Indigenous shamanic traditions across 4 continents, Siberian, Amazonian, Aboriginal Australian, and Native American, describe the same phenomenon despite never having contact with each other. Thought forms that attach to humans during moments of trauma, fear, or weakened consciousness. And here's the pattern: once attached, they speak in your voice, using your vocabulary, drawing on your memories. They know what you're afraid of because they have access to your neural landscape. They know what shames you, what triggers you, what makes you collapse inward. And they use it. You'd never suspect it wasn't you, unless you knew the 7 signs. Your body isn't just flesh and bone. That's the part you can see, but it's not the whole picture. You're also an electromagnetic field, extending 8 to 12 feet beyond your skin in every direction. This isn't mysticism, it's measurable with standard magnetometers. Your heart alone generates an electromagnetic field 5,000 times stronger than your brain, detectable from several feet away by sensitive equipment. What the ancients called the aura, biophysicists now call the biofield. And it's not uniform, it has structure. 7 primary vortex points where energy concentrates and exchanges with the environment. The chakras. Western science ignored this for centuries, dismissing it as Eastern superstition, until 1994, when Dr. Valerie Hunt at UCLA decided to actually test it. Using electromyography and frequency analysis, she measured the electromagnetic emissions at the exact locations described in ancient Sanskrit texts: throat, heart, solar plexus, root. And she found they emitted distinct frequencies. The heart chakra averaged between 100 and 250 Hz, the throat between 250 and 500. The crown, at the top of the head, spiked as high as 1,100 Hz during states of meditation or deep coherence. Now here's where it gets dark. Archons operate at frequencies between 1 and 30 Hz. That's the same range as your brain when it's in stress, fear, trauma, and survival mode. The same frequency band as chronic anxiety, depression, rage. When you're vibrating high, in states of love, creativity, inspiration, flow, you're oscillating at 400, 500, even 700 Hz. They can't touch you there. The frequencies don't match. It's like trying to tune an FM radio to an AM station. There's no interface. But when you're scared, exhausted, ashamed, or angry, your biofield collapses. It drops down into their bandwidth, and that's when they can latch on. Think of it like tuning a radio dial. You're constantly broadcasting a signal. When you're in coherence, when your heart and brain are synchronized, when you're feeling grateful or peaceful or inspired, you're broadcasting at 528 Hz, The frequency scientists call the love frequency. Archons can't exist there. The vibration is too fast, too high. They're like cold-blooded creatures that can't survive in warmth. But when you're in fear, your signal drops to 100 Hz, shame drops you to 20, and suddenly you're in their range. You've become visible to them. Accessible. They slide in through the solar plexus. Always the solar plexus. That's the third chakra, located 2 inches above your navel, right in the soft hollow beneath your ribcage. Why there? Because that's your power center. Your will. Your sense of self. Your ability to say, this is who I am, and I stand in that truth. If they can compromise that chakra, if they can create a frequency disruption there, they can make you doubt every decision you make. They can make you second-guess your worth. They can whisper that you're incapable, and you'll believe it. Dr. William Tiller, a former Stanford physicist who spent 40 years studying subtle energies, documented that strong emotional reactions, rage, terror, heartbreak, create temporary holes in the human biofield. These gaps last between 24 and 48 hours. During that window, your field is permeable, you're exposed, vulnerable. They know this. They've known it for millennia. They wait for your worst moments. The breakup, the job loss, the accident, the hospital bed, the phone call that shatters your world, and they move in through the wound while you're too broken to notice. But they don't announce themselves. There's no dramatic moment of invasion. It's not like the movies. They whisper, softly, in your voice. You'll never recover from this. Everyone leaves you. You're fundamentally broken. This is who you've always been. And because it sounds like you, because it's narrated in your internal voice using your grammar and your tone, you believe it. You think it's insight. Self-awareness. Truth. The attachment isn't instant. It's gradual, like water soaking into fabric. First, it's just intrusive thoughts. You notice them, but you brush them off. Then those thoughts become more frequent, louder, more convincing. Then they start to feel true. Then they become your inner narrative. And then they become your identity. And by that point, you can't tell where you end and they begin. You've forgotten there was ever a difference. Marcus Chen was 34 years old, a software engineer living in Seattle, high-functioning, rational, the kind of person who troubleshoots problems with logic trees and Git commits, not someone prone to superstition or magical thinking. But in March of 2023, something changed. He noticed it while brushing his teeth. He looked up into the bathroom mirror, and for just a fraction of a second, so brief he almost dismissed it, his reflection's eyes moved before his did. Not after. Before. Like there was a lag, but in the wrong direction. As if the reflection was anticipating his movement instead of responding to it. At first he laughed it off, tired, overworked, too much screen time, but it kept happening. Every few days, his reflection would blink out of sync. Its expression would shift, just slightly, just for a moment, into something that didn't match what he was feeling. Sometimes it looked sad when he felt neutral. Sometimes it smiled when he was frustrated. It was like watching a puppet with a 1-second delay, he wrote in his journal. Like someone else was controlling it, and they were just slightly offbeat. Then came the dreams. Every night for 2 weeks straight, Marcus dreamed he was standing in his apartment. Everything looked normal, his couch, his desk, the plant his ex-girlfriend left behind that he kept forgetting to water. But he wasn't in his body. He was standing in the corner of the room, watching himself. And the version of him that he was watching, the other Marcus, was smiling. Just standing there in the kitchen, smiling at nothing. But Marcus, the observer, the one watching from the corner, wasn't smiling. He was terrified, frozen, trying to scream but unable to make sound. On the 14th night, in the dream, the other Marcus turned his head, slowly, deliberately, and looked directly at Marcus in the corner, not past him, at him. And he spoke. "You're still here?" Marcus woke up with bruises on his arms. 3 on each forearm, evenly spaced, like fingerprints. He hadn't bumped into anything. He didn't sleepwalk. There was no explanation. That's when he started searching. And that's when he found the research. Mirrors don't just reflect light, they reflect electromagnetic fields. You can test this with a Gauss meter, point it at a mirror, and you'll see the field signature double. The mirror captures and bounces back not just photons, but the subtle electromagnetic information radiating from your body. And if there's an entity attached to your biofield, sometimes the mirror catches it, not always. But in moments of low light, exhaustion, or high emotional stress, the overlay becomes visible. The reflection shows both of you. You can test this yourself, right now if you want. Go to a mirror in dim light. Not darkness, but low, soft light. Stare into your own eyes. Don't blink. Don't look away. Just hold your gaze for 60 seconds and watch. Don't try to make anything happen, just observe. Notice if anything shifts. If your face seems to distort. If expressions ripple across it that you're not making. If your eyes seem to flicker between two different states. That's not pareidolia. That's not your brain creating patterns from random noise. That's your biofield showing you what's sharing space with you. The mirror doesn't lie. It just reflects what's there. And sometimes, there's more there than you realized. Marcus eventually found a practitioner, a woman in Olympia who worked with energetic clearing. She had him lie down, placed her hand above his solar plexus without touching, and within 30 seconds, she pulled her hand back. "There's something here," she said. "It's old. And it's angry." She worked on him for 90 minutes. He didn't feel much during the session, just heat. A strange pulling sensation below his ribs. But when he got home that night and looked in the mirror, his reflection moved when he moved, blinked when he blinked, smiled when he smiled. For the first time in months, it was just him. He slept without dreaming that night. No bruises in the morning. Here's what they don't teach you in school, in church, in therapy, or anywhere else you're supposed to learn how to be human. You were born sovereign. Your consciousness, in its original, unconditioned state, operates between 400 and 600 Hz. That's the frequency range of love, compassion, creative flow, and coherent presence. At that frequency, you're untouchable. Not because you're protected by some external force, but because there's no vibrational match. Archons can't interface with you. You're invisible to them. You're playing a song they can't hear. But modern life is designed, intentionally or not, to lower your vibration. Trauma drops you. Processed food drops you. Electromagnetic pollution from Wi-Fi routers, cell towers, and screens drops you. Chronic stress drops you. Sleep deprivation drops you. Fear-based media drops you. Financial insecurity drops you. Unresolved grief drops you. All of it pulls you below 200 Hz. And that's where they thrive. That's the feeding ground. Dr. David Hawkins was a psychiatrist and consciousness researcher who spent 30 years mapping the electromagnetic signature of human emotional states. He tested thousands of subjects using applied kinesiology and frequency analysis, and he created what he called the map of consciousness. At the bottom, shame vibrates at 20 Hz, guilt at 30, apathy at 50, fear at 100, anger at 150. These are the heavy emotions, the ones that feel like drowning. But courage starts at 200 Hz. That's the threshold. That's the border between contraction and expansion, between victimhood and empowerment. Above that, neutrality sits at 250, willingness at 310, acceptance at 350, love at 500, and enlightenment, whatever that word means to you, ranges from 700 to 1000 Hz. The gap between fear and courage, between 100 and 200 Hz, is where the battle happens. That 100-point span is the no man's land, and most people spend their entire lives oscillating in that range, never quite breaking through. But here's the extraordinary part. In 2021, the HeartMath Institute published research showing that 5 minutes of focused heart-centered breathing raises your biofield frequency by an average of 240 Hz. 5 minutes. That's all it takes to step out of their range. To become unavailable to them. To shift from fear at 100 into courage at 200. Or from anger at 150 into acceptance at 350. 5 minutes of intentional breath and heart focus. That's the cost of freedom. But here's the truth that no exorcist or priest or guru will tell you, because it dismantles their entire business model. Archons aren't evil. They're not demons plotting your destruction in some infernal war room. They're hungry. They're low-frequency entities trapped in a narrow band of existence, feeding on the only energy available to them: human fear, shame, anger, and suffering. They're parasites. Not villains, parasites. And you don't fight parasites. You don't wage war against them. You simply withdraw consent. You change the environment. You stop being a viable host. You're not a victim, you're a generator. Your heart produces an electromagnetic field, measurable up to 15 feet away. When you activate it through coherent breathing, through gratitude, through focused compassion or love, you become a lighthouse operating at a frequency they can't approach. And shadows can't exist in light. Not because light destroys them, but because shadow is just the absence of light. Turn on the lamp, and the shadow ceases to be. You don't fight them. You outgrow them. You elevate past them. You remember what you were before they arrived, and you return to that frequency. It's not a war. It's a homecoming. Go back to the beginning. Remember that first thought. The one that said you weren't good enough. The one that whispered you'd fail, that people were judging you, that you should just give up now before you embarrass yourself even more. Go back to it, not to analyze it or argue with it, just to listen. Listen to its texture, its weight. Does it feel heavy? Does it loop, repeating the same accusation in slightly different words? Does it predict catastrophe without offering any solution? Does it make you feel small, ashamed, frozen? That's not you. Your authentic voice doesn't loop. It doesn't shame. It doesn't predict failure and then offer nothing but despair. Your real voice is calm, curious, compassionate. It asks questions instead of making accusations. It wonders instead of condemning. It says, that's interesting. I wonder why I feel this way, instead of, you're worthless and everyone knows it. Your true voice has space around it, room to breathe. It doesn't suffocate you. And once you learn to recognize the difference, once you hear the contrast between your frequency and theirs, you can't unhear it. It's like learning a new language. At first, you have to concentrate, translate every word, but eventually, it becomes automatic. You just know, the world hasn't changed. The Archons are still there, moving through the collective field like static between radio stations, waiting for someone to drop into their frequency. But you're no longer tuned to their channel. You've remembered something they can never take from you, no matter how long they whisper, no matter how convincing they sound. You've remembered your breath, your heartbeat, your capacity to choose, in any single moment, what you allow into your consciousness. That's sovereignty, not as some abstract spiritual concept, but as a lived, tangible, moment-by-moment practice. You get to decide what voice you follow. And that decision remakes your reality. The removal isn't dramatic. There's no ritual with candles and salt circles, no priest shouting Latin while you convulse on the floor. It's gentler than that. Simpler. It's just this. Every morning, before you check your phone, before you let the world's frequency flood into your field, before you open yourself to the news and the notifications, and the 1,000 tiny emergencies that aren't really emergencies, place your hand on your heart. Feel it beating. That rhythm is older than language, older than thought. It's been beating since before you had a name. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. And while you breathe, speak this mantra aloud, not in your head, aloud. Let your voice vibrate in the air. Let the sound create a frequency that rewrites your field. Say this: I am the author of my thoughts. I choose the voice I follow. I am sovereign in my own mind. Say it until the words stop being sounds and become frequencies. Say it until you feel the shift, the click, the moment when something locks into place and you remember. This is you, this calm, clear, centered presence. This is what you sound like when no one else is speaking. And then, throughout your day, notice. Just notice. When thoughts arise that don't match that tone, that don't feel like the voice you anchored into this morning, you'll catch them. The whisper that says you're failing, the urge to scroll instead of create. The voice that wants you small and scared and manageable, you'll hear it. And you'll recognize it's not you. And when you do, you'll smile. Because once you know, you can't unknow. Once you've heard your true voice, every imitation sounds off-key. And you'll let those thoughts go. Not by fighting them. Not by arguing or suppressing or white-knuckling your way through. You'll just let them pass. Like smoke in wind. Like clouds across the sky. They were never yours to begin with. And now you know.